Most of the money in the economy is actually just numbers in a computer system, and we still think of it as cash, but actually most money now is electronic. The question is, where does that money come from? And unlike the cash, which is only created by governments and central banks, the money that we're actually using for most of the economy is created by commercial banks. So they create money every time somebody takes out a loan. You walk into a bank and take out a mortgage. That money isn't coming from somebody else's bank account. It's actually new money that's created effectively out of nothing through the accounting.
Well, I think if the people knew what the banking system is up to, as Henry Ford said, there would be a revolution tomorrow morning. The fact is, most people think that what a bank does is lend you money that someone else has put in the bank previously. But what a bank actually does, what a commercial bank does, is to create money from nothing and then lend it to you at interest. If I do that, if I manufacture money in my own home, it's called counterfeiting. If an accountant creates money out of nothing in the company accounts, it's called cooking the books. But if a bank does it, it's perfectly legal. And so long as you allow fraud to be legalized, then all kinds of problems are going to pop up in the economic system, which you can't do anything about.
Private banks create money out of nothing and lend it at interest. Now, that sounds absurd. When I teach sophomores, about money and banking and how banks, they never believe it. And so you have to go through it again and again. Yes, banks really do create money. They really do. Here's how it happens. And it's absurd, and they're right to doubt that could possibly be what's really going on. But it is.
Banks do this with a trick of double entry bookkeeping. So when you go into the bank and you take out a loan, the bank does two things. In one column of its books, it enters a liability. This is the money that the bank has created and put in your account. In the other column of its books, the bank enters an asset. This is the money that you owe back to the bank. Now everything is okay because the two numbers cancel out.
All of the money that we're using is created as debt. For every pound that's in your bank account, somebody else somewhere has a pound of debt. The entire money supply is on loan from the banking system. And what that means is we have to pay interest on all of the money that has been created. In the UK, this interest adds up to £200 billion a year, has been transferred from the public to the financial sector. The burden of servicing this interest means that businesses and families have this obligation to keep earning money to repay all this debt, but actually the debt can never be repaid.
It's a catch-22. As an individual, you want to pay off your debts. But if everyone in society did that, there wouldn't be any money left because money actually is debt. So if we all pay off our debts, the current economic system would collapse.
Now, if the banking lobby is very strong, they're going to say, well, we don't want to change this system. We're making so much money out of it. What we have to do is, A, try and convince the people that it's their fault, that their wage claims are too high, and that's why we're having lots of inflation, or people are speculating on housing, and that's why house prices are going up. What they're not going to say is that this is happening because banks are creating money out of nothing and pumping it into the system, and that's why prices are going up.
But how is it that we've ended up with a system in which banks have the power to create money? Since 1971, when President Nixon took the United States off what was left of the gold standard, the world has operated under a system of money known as fiat. The dollar, the pound, the euro are all government fiat currencies. Fiat is a Latin word meaning let it be so. It is the law that this government currency be money. Indeed, without that legal enforcement and the fact that we must pay taxes with this money, that dollar bill or that computer digit that represents a dollar would be pretty much meaningless. Only the government has the power to issue fiat money, but banks can create it through lending. Over the last 40 years, since this system of fiat money became the global norm, the supply of money has grown exponentially. In fact, we've seen the greatest growth in the supply of money in history. But who benefits? Of course, those that have the power to issue money, governments and banks. Then, those companies and individuals that get this money early. They can spend it before the prices of the things they want to buy have risen to reflect the new money in circulation. In other words, they get services, products or assets cheap. but prices soon rise. So holders of assets such as houses or shares will then see gains without there necessarily being any improvements to the company or house in question. Often this can lead to speculative bubbles. But what about those at the bottom of the pyramid? Those on fixed wages or incomes, those who live in remote areas, or those with savings? By the time this newly created money has filtered down to them, the prices of the things they want to buy have increased. Their savings buy them less, however, and their wages remain largely unchanged. In some cases, they have to take on debt just to be able to afford the things they were previously able to buy, which means they have to go back to the banks. In reality, this process of creating money only redistributes wealth from the bottom to the top of the pyramid, and thus that ever-increasing gulf between rich and poor gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
What we need to do to fix the money system is remove this power to create money from the banks, return it to some democratic, transparent, accountable body, and make sure that money is created in the public interest and spent into the real economy instead of being pumped into property bubbles and financial markets.
If we had a money system in which governments had sovereign control over the money supply, then it would be perfectly legitimate for governments to invest in the things that we know that we need in order to create a good society, a low-carbon society, a society which is sustainable, a society in which we have more equality. The money system is absolutely key to that vision.
In such a system, we'd still have banks, but they'd only be allowed to loan money which had been deposited with them. It would reduce inflation in the economy, it would allow us to reduce resource use, and it would give us a much more stable financial system.
That kind of framework, an independent monetary authority with the money supply actually under sovereign control but regulated by an independent authority, is a much, much safer route than anything that we had before.